The locker slammed shut. Inside, Tyler gasped in the dark, fists bleeding as laughter echoed. Outside, someone filmed it, thinking it was just another prank. But no one knew who his father was. What happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Tyler Brooks had only been at Edgewood High for 6 weeks, but already the hallways knew his name. Not because he did anything worth remembering, but because he was the kind of kid it was safe to forget. He didn't walk with purpose. He didn't speak up in class. When teachers called on him, his voice came out thin, like a match trying to strike in the wind. He existed in the negative space between cliques, the kind of presence that made you glance past him rather than at him. He didn't try to be invisible. He simply was. His clothes were always washed but never new. Faded jeans, off-brand sneakers, sweatshirts one size too big. His backpack had frayed seams near the zipper, stitched back together with mismatched thread. There was nothing remarkable about him, except for how little he fought to stand out. And that made him a magnet for someone like Zach Martin. Zach didn't need a reason. He needed an audience. And Tyler was the perfect prop. It started in the usual ways, Travis tripping him in the hallway, Jaden yelling, "Heads up," before launching a cafeteria roll that smacked Tyler in the ear. Zach was always nearby, laughing with that easy confidence of someone who believed the world would always forgive him. His charm was weaponized. Even when he was cruel, it sounded like a joke, and that made it all the more dangerous. Then came that morning. The morning no one would forget. Tyler was at his locker, swapping out his English book for a history binder. He felt the rush of footsteps behind him, but by the time he turned, it was too late. A shoulder drove hard into his back, and he slammed forward, collapsing into the narrow metal compartment like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The door slammed shut, sealing him in darkness. Laughter exploded outside. Fists pounded the metal from the outside. "Yo, say something, locker goblin!" Jaden shouted. Through the thin slats, Tyler saw Zach's face, too close, his eyes alight with cruelty. "Stay in there, loser. At least the locker's the only thing that'll remember your name." A camera phone blinked red. Inside the locker, it was dark and hot. His breath echoed. His heart punched against his ribs like it wanted out too. He pushed against the door, but it didn't budge. The latch had jammed, so he pounded. Not out of panic, but fury. Each strike of his fist wasn't a cry for help. It was rage looking for escape. Outside, the laughter faded. Inside, Tyler's knuckles split. Blood smeared against cold metal. No one saw his face. But if they had, they might have noticed something change behind his eyes. Something small, but sharp and permanent. At home, silence clung to Tyler like a second skin. He wasn't the kind of kid who slammed doors or shouted into pillows. His pain lived quietly, folded into the corners of his bedroom, buried in the long pauses between half-sentences. His mom thought he was just adjusting. New school, new town, new life. What she didn't see were the way his shoulders tensed before entering a room or how he flinched when laughter sounded too close behind him. But the real weight, the part he carried like an invisible anchor, was the truth about his father. Detective Chief Randall Brooks hadn't been a part of Tyler's life for years. The man was all sharp lines and hard silences, a shadow in pressed blues who had once chosen his badge over his family. But now, after an ugly divorce and a transfer across 3 counties, Randall had reached out. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was regret. Tyler didn't ask. When given the choice, he said yes. He wanted to believe people could change. He wanted something real. Edgewood was supposed to be that clean slate. Father and son, rebuilding. But even as they shared the same roof, Tyler kept the truth about school buried under locked lips. He hadn't told a soul that the towering man with the patrol cruiser in their driveway was his dad. Not because he was ashamed, but because he wanted to earn respect without leverage, without the badge. Instead, he got bruises. They layered his ribs like fingerprints, dark, swelling testimony to how cruelty doesn't need a reason. Each one was a secret he tucked beneath long sleeves and tight smiles, until one night, pulling off his hoodie too fast, pain flared white-hot across his torso, and he gasped. It was too loud. His dad looked up from the dinner table, eyes narrowing. "What was that?" "It's nothing," Tyler muttered. But Randall stood. He crossed the room in 3 strides, and when Tyler turned, trying to hide it, the shirt lifted just enough to betray him. The bruises bloomed in silent confession. "Who did this to you?" The words were low, but they cut with precision. His voice wasn't angry. It was controlled, and that made it worse. Tyler didn't answer, just shook his head. "It doesn't matter." But it did, and the truth sat heavy between them. Randall didn't argue. He didn't lecture. He just stared, jaw clenched, eyes unreadable. Then he turned away. The next morning, Tyler opened the front door to find his dad waiting beside the car. Full uniform, badge glinting in the sun like a warning. The drive to school was wordless. Tyler's chest felt hollow. He knew what would happen when they pulled into that lot. And when they did, heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The boy who was stuffed into a locker last week? Turns out, his dad was the police chief. And the silence that followed him inside wasn't mocking this time. It was fear. The hallways at Edgewood High felt different. Quieter. Like the school itself had paused to take a breath. Whispers trailed in Tyler's wake now, but they didn't carry the same sting as before. They weren't mocking. They were curious, anxious, uneasy. Because the rumor had already spread like wildfire. The kid they crammed into a locker? He was Chief Brooks' son. And the chief had walked him to the front doors in full uniform. Zach Martin's swagger faltered for the first time all year. His laughs came out too loud now, forced and brittle at the edges. Jaden stopped shouting across the halls. Travis kept his head down, fingers twitching at the hem of his sleeves. For years they'd moved through the school like they owned it, untouchable above the rules. But power had shifted, even if no one said it out loud. Teachers who once ignored hallway antics now lingered longer, eyes sharper, slower to smile at Zach's fake charm. In the cafeteria, Tyler sat alone, tray untouched. He hadn't planned on staying. He didn't want the stares, the sideways glances. But before he could get up, a voice stopped him. "I'm sorry." It was Lena Avery, soft-spoken. Always sat 2 tables away with her sketchbook. She looked nervous, but her eyes didn't waver. "I saw the video. I should have said something sooner. What they did wasn't okay." She hesitated, then added, "And I think I can help." The next morning, the 2 of them stood outside Principal Monroe's office, hands clenched around Lena's phone. The footage was shaky but clear. Zach's smirk, Tyler's muffled yells, the laughter, the final mocking line. It was all there. Principal Monroe watched it in silence, his face tightening with every second. Under normal circumstances, this would have been buried, explained away as a misunderstanding. But this time, there were eyes watching, and not just within the school. Later that day, Chief Brooks returned, not in uniform, not with authority behind him, but as a father. He sat across from Monroe, quiet and resolute. When Zach and his parents arrived, the boy tried to spin it, called it a joke, a dumb prank. Tyler, voice trembling but unwavering, stood. "You shoved me into a locker and left me there. You didn't care if I panicked. You didn't care at all. That wasn't a joke. Zach opened his mouth, closed it. No snappy comeback, no sarcastic grin. The silence was louder than anything he could have said. In the end, it wasn't about punishment. Tyler didn't want revenge. He didn't want Zach expelled or arrested. What he wanted, what he needed, was acknowledgement, accountability, change. And for once, the system didn't turn away. The school issued suspensions. Zach and his crew were ordered into counseling, and a school-wide assembly was planned, one where students would talk about respect, accountability, and silence. Tyler agreed to speak, not because he wanted to be heard, but because he finally knew he could be. The stage lights were warm against Tyler's skin, but his palms were cold. From behind the curtain, he could hear the restless shuffle of an auditorium packed wall to wall. Students murmuring, the occasional nervous cough, 1,000 unspoken thoughts hanging in the air like fog. He stood in the wings, clutching a wrinkled index card he'd rewritten 3 times but barely glanced at now. Principal Monroe gave a short introduction and stepped aside. Then came silence. Tyler stepped forward. The mic crackled as he approached it. For a moment he couldn't lift his gaze. He stared at the wood grain of the podium, at the faint scuff marks left by years of sneakers and speeches. Then he looked up, and there they were. The same students who'd laughed when he was shoved into a locker. The ones who had filmed it. The ones who had looked away. He swallowed hard. "You don't need to throw a punch to break someone," he said, his voice wavering at the edges. "Sometimes silence does that just fine." No one moved. He breathed in. The fear didn't vanish, but it shifted, became fuel. "I'm not here because my dad wears a badge," he continued, his voice steadier now. "I'm here because I shouldn't have to be someone's son to be treated like a person." A beat passed, then another. No one clapped, no one whispered. It was better than applause. It was respect. Later that week, Lena created a support group for students who felt invisible. Not weak, not broken, just unseen. Tyler joined her, not as a leader, but as someone who understood what it meant to sit in a crowded room and feel like furniture. And kids came, quietly at first, then steadily. Not to be fixed, but to be heard. Zach returned to school after his suspension. Gone was the trademark grin. He didn't speak much anymore. When he passed Tyler in the hall, he didn't smirk. He didn't sneer. He just looked away. Something in him had broken. Maybe guilt. Maybe shame. Or maybe, for the first time, he saw Tyler not as a target, but as a mirror. And Tyler? He walked differently now, back straight, shoulders relaxed, eyes forward. He didn't slink along walls or shrink under glances. He moved like someone who'd found weight in his own name. He hadn't asked for attention. He hadn't asked for a fight. All he ever wanted was to matter, not through fear or favor or lineage. But now, people saw him, not because of his last name, not because of the uniform behind him, but because he stood up, because he spoke. And that, more than any act of revenge, was power. The kind no one could take away.